Hello and welcome to another fun-filled edition of Adam's Music Box. And today I want to talk about a very little known band, but with a pretty big retrospective cult following. And this is a band called Air. Now, there are many bands called Air throughout the world, and there was even Earth, Wind, and Fire. Where's the water? All of these various naturally occurring phenomena seem to make good band names, but the band that I'm talking about was centered around keyboardist Tom Coppola and his then wife Gogi Coppola. She was the lead vocalist for the band. You also had John Siegler and Mark Rosengarten in this band, making up the totality of the quartet. Now, what made this band so interesting is that they weren't sort of your typical jazz fusion band. They were somewhere between the world of psychedelic rock, the world of highly sophisticated, by that I mean harmonically, chordally sophisticated folk music and sort of the avant-garde, modern sort of post-bop jazz world of the time. And when you put it all together, you get an incredibly listenable album that I think, if more people heard it, would appeal to pop listeners and jazz listeners and rock listeners. And indeed, at the time, all three of those groups, was that three or four? I don't know. Wasn't counting Joe Biden moment, folks. But all of those groups tended to like the album. Obviously, it didn't sell huge. They were on a small label, a label that was actually founded originally by Herbie Mann, a great musician himself. It's called Embryo. And the album was really good, and it had some great musicians who were just sort of starting off on their long careers. You had the Brecker brothers, Randy on trumpet, Michael on saxophone, who guested on the album. Jan Hammer made an appearance, Herbie Mann made an appearance as well. And so you had some pretty heavy hitters on this album. And it's remarkably sophisticated. Again, the chords, the harmony, the odd time signatures, the frequent changes within every individual song, the uniqueness of Gogi Coppola's voice, which really it didn't sound like your typical jazz voice. It was a bit how it was a bit more what's the word I'm looking for? Almost not timid, but vulnerable than your typical full-throated jazz voice. But at the same time, it had a kind of sweetness that you didn't necessarily find in rock vocal. It was really unique. The whole band was unique. And they didn't do that much more in the studio together. But they did, in terms of Tom and Gogi Coppola, they did an album called Shine the Light of Love in the early 80s. And this album was sort of your sort of post-disco R&B type of album, but those same interesting harmonies and even some interesting rhythmic stuff was going on there too. That's on your Spotify's and your other streaming services. Check that out, as is the original Air album. And like I said, there's a lot of bands with that name, but you can recognize it by the image behind me. Check them out. Let me know what you think. It's fun not only to talk about the well-known stuff, but some of the more obscure stuff. And I think you out there might enjoy it. If you enjoyed this, a like, subscribe, and share it around, and we will see you next time. Take care.